Well, welcome everyone to our fifth episode of Startup School. Today is all about mastering your to-do list. Whether you're just starting out or whether you are somewhat along in your business, there will be something in here for you. Now, where we left off with our series, we have two people who were starting up their business. The first was Sarah. She's got Possum Palette, and these are fake businesses that our team created to teach the entire series with. Possum Palette is a customized fresh pet food delivery service that offers nutritional pet food kits with quality ingredients specifically designed for your pet. Homer has Brainy Home Companions, which is a personal comfort care company that offers compassionate companionship and home care services. And his services include brain stimulating activities and exercises to ensure that your body and your mind are well cared for. Now, both of them have figured out their message and they've done all the work to develop and begin selling their product. And now it's time to make it real. So what steps are they going to take to turn this from an idea to a real business? Now, one thing I want to say here is that many times when we're starting up a business, especially if it's the first time we've ever done this, and if we haven't helped anybody else start a business before, we think that the idea is the most important part. And it's not unimportant. But oftentimes our idea isn't necessarily as unique as we think it is. And even if it is, what matters the most is actually executing on that idea. Where businesses succeed or fail is in the execution stage, which is pulling it off, making it happen, which is why we made this one of the 5 classes. So Sarah has done financial projections, and anyone who came to class 4 heard about how to do that. And she's decided to price her kits at $25 each. And she's done a break-even analysis and says, if I sell 183 units in the first year, I'll break even. But she wants a little bit of profit, so she shoots for 200 units in the first year. Now, this is all assuming that Sarah doesn't need to live on her business. It just has to turn a profit. Homer has done the same sort of analysis and figured that he's going to price his services at $145 each. And with his break-even analysis, he can do somewhere around 30 visits-ish in the first year in order to cover fixed and variable expenses and make a little bit of profit. And that also assumes that he doesn't need his business to support him, because it's pretty hard to have your business completely support you in year 1. So, okay, all the preliminary work has been done, and now it's time to get to work actually running these businesses. So Sarah and Homer decide to establish goals for themselves as to how am I going to get to these things, these milestones that I want. So what are goals? Well, goals are what you want to achieve within a certain amount of time. Now, it sounds really simple, but a lot of times people call things goals when they're really not goals at all, or what we call goals are really a vision or a strategy and not goals per se. So we want to make sure that if we call something a goal, it's actually a goal, which is what do I want to achieve within a specific period of time? Because you have to know if you made your goal or not. So let's think about some things that Sarah might say are her goals, or Homer. Sarah might say, I want to break even. That's a terrible goal. Why? Because there's no time period. Or she might say, I want to break even this year. And that's slightly less terrible, but not good. So now we could refine it a little more, and she might say, I want to achieve and pass break even by the end of my first fiscal year. Okay, that's not bad. At least now there's not just sort of this year, but she's saying at the end of fiscal year 1. Even better is I want to reach annualized sales of $5,000 by the end of my first fiscal year. And even better than that would be I want to have sold 200 units at $25 each by the end of my first fiscal year. Homer could go through the same process. And let's assume he first establishes his quote goals as break even and all that stuff. But now he's getting a little smarter about goals and he says, ooh, I want to reach an annualized sales volume of $6,000 by my first fiscal year end. And even better, I want 42 visits of $145 each by my first fiscal year end. So one rule of thumb that you can use to know if your goal could be improved is if what you say is your goal could be applied to virtually anyone, you know it's not good enough. So that'll give you a rule of thumb. So the goals we talked about so far that Sarah and Homer established for themselves are great for short-term or midterm goals, because you can see on the screen, short-term or quarterly and midterm is 12 months. So they both said 12 months. But what else? What else might they want to have as goals? They might have the germ of an idea of a longer-term goal, which might be something like, boy, I'd really like my business to provide $50,000 in additional net income to my family by fiscal year 3, by the 3rd year in business. Or I'd really love to see 50 happier and healthier dogs. Or I'd love to hear and share stories of seniors getting more engaged with life again and making a difference in younger people's lives. So how do we flesh those sort of more nebulous ideas out, kind of like we did with the shorter goal? Well, what we can do is we can make the goals SMART C. And you may have heard the term SMART goals before, but I add a C to the end of it, which stands for compelling and control. Because SMART is often not enough to make us actually accomplish the goals we say we want. Because relevant, which is the R, is not the same thing as compelling. Relevant means, yeah, it applies to my business or it applies to my situation so far. But compelling means it matters to me so much, I'm willing to go for it. I'm willing to risk fear. I'm willing to risk rejection. Whatever it happens to be, I'm willing to risk it because this goal means so much to me. Or alternatively, sometimes you cannot control the outcome at all. Like you can't necessarily control how much you have in sales. So you might want to make your goal activities that you can control that you believe will lead you to the goals that you want that are not necessarily controllable. So in other words, I'm going to take X number of actions per week that I think are going to lead me to higher sales. So let's walk through this process with those 3 rough goal ideas. So let's say the first one. I want my business to provide $50,000 in additional net income to my family by the end of the 3rd year of business. So the first thing I would do is a calculation to find out how much that is in sales, because I got to go back to my break-even spreadsheet and increase volume until I see $50,000 in net income. So for Sarah, that's about 3,400 dog food kits a year. So some of the things that Sarah's going to now have to consider is how much work is it to put together 3,400 kits per year to get to that volume? Do I have to add costs for a contractor to assist in getting to this volume, or can I do it myself? And if I have to hire a contractor to help me, How much per hour is that going to eat into my net income, which means I then have to go back to my spreadsheet and revisit those numbers. In Homer's case, it's about 425 visits per year. So again, now Homer's got to say to himself, at what point am I going to max out with just myself providing the service? Can I do 25 visits a year? Now, he might say 5 is the maximum visits per day because I need to carve out some time for marketing and paying bills and stuff like that. So maybe it's really 4 per day. And so if it's four per day, can I really get 425 a year? Probably not. So again, if I have to pay someone else to do some of the work on my behalf, how much is that going to eat into my profits? And so now I'm going back to my spreadsheet to revisit everything, to calculate the impact. So you can see that the financial and the operational get things done are really intertwined here. So my goal for my business to generate at least $50,000 in net income by the 3rd fiscal year end, which represents however many units, has now been refined to become a little more specific and a little more measurable. I've also done some work to figure out if it's attainable or not by myself. So yes, it meets the specific criteria, it meets the measurable, the attainable is open to question, it's definitely relevant, and yes, it's time bound. But now, is it compelling or is it under my control? Probably not. So what might make that goal more compelling? If I'm Sarah, I might say, boy, my daughter wants to go to veterinary school, and having this additional $50,000 would really help to pay her tuition. Now my goal is way more compelling than I just randomly came up with a number like $50,000. Or Homer, my family is trying to keep my father-in-law out of a nursing home so he can age in place and die in his own home eventually. That extra $50,000 would help pay for skilled nursing care at home. Again, way more compelling than I just want to reach $50,000. So anytime you have a reason behind the goal, some of which might be to help the people you want to help, and others might be personal, like Sarah and Homer, it's going to be more compelling and you're more likely to take the actions necessary, even if they're scary or hard. Secondarily, what can you actually control? Sarah has done some market research, back to class number 2, and found that it takes an average of 5 touches from initial contact with her brand to get to a first order. And once people order, she has an 85% retention rate for her customers. So now she's going to make a goal that's more controllable by saying, I am going to reach out to 3,700 people in the course of the first year to achieve an average of 279 kits per month. Because she's figured out that's what it takes, is that many touches. Homer has figured out that because he's providing a service, it takes more. It takes an average of 9 touches for Homer from initial contact to booking a first visit. So once people engage with him and actually book him for the first time, he has a 75% retention rate. So he is going to reach out to 810 people during his 3rd fiscal year to achieve his average visit rate of 35 a month, which is going to get to the number of visits he needs for his yearly goal by the 3rd year. Now, that was a mouthful. I certainly don't expect you to remember it. I just want you to grasp the concept that oftentimes simply having a monetary goal isn't enough because you don't know if you can reach it, and you have no control over those sales, but you do have control over what you do. And everything that I just said was just an estimate. It's based on industry averages that they found online, and it's their average so far, which is a limited amount of experience. So they don't really know. So this is the kind of thing you're going to get better at as you go with your business. You will find what your own sort of pattern is for your own customers. And as you get better at messaging and marketing, you'll find that some of those statistics will get better too, because sometimes in the beginning it might take way more touches because you don't really know how to communicate as well, and you'll get better and better at it, and that number will go down. So again, goal number 2, I want to see 50 happier and healthier dogs. Is this a smart C goal? Not really. It's okay. It's got a number in it. But how could this goal become more smart C? 1, figure out how many dogs would be serviced at this sales level goal. To have 50 actual customers, because I've got some that are dropping off and how many touches it takes, etc. So now it's like, how many dogs would be serviced at my sales level goal? I'm going to estimate 175. And how many would I get maybe testimonials from? Maybe 10 to 15% of those if I'm fortunate. And so maybe a realistic goal isn't 50 ongoing customers, but maybe 25 to begin with. And then how do I get them to tell me whether they liked it or not, so I can figure out what I might need to tweak in order to make my retention rate higher? Well, I can get them to give me feedback by giving them easy ways for people to send me information about how they did with the kits. Social media hashtags or tagging me, or emails sent directly to me that encourage them to respond. And again, I want to use my marketing tips. So I want to use humor to engage with people. And maybe I'd even call 10% of those customers and ask them what they thought about the kits that they purchased. And since my mission is to actually help dog owners find food that's nutritious and delicious, I want to know if what I'm doing is making a difference. And so my goal is to get 25 testimonials from customers during my 3rd year of operations. And so now my Smart C goal is to reach out to 10% of those customers via phone and either email or direct message the others to ask them their opinion. And any reasonable negative responses I'll use to improve my company's performance. So you can see that going from a nebulous goal of, I'd like to see 50 happier and healthier dogs, which sounds really cool, has suddenly become has much more teeth to it and much more actionable, because I've done all this work to figure out, how am I going to get there? All right. So what if you do all this and you don't make the goals you established? Well, the first question you want to ask yourself is, did I take all the actions I said I would? And if the answer is yes, then maybe you need to learn more about how to do what you tried. Maybe it's better communication skills. Maybe it's better marketing. Maybe it's better analysis, financial projections analysis, because maybe I just didn't know how to figure that all out. Or maybe what you did simply wasn't enough volume to deliver the results you needed. So you did all the right stuff and it just wasn't enough of it. So then what you'd want to do is recalibrate your projections based on actual results. So in other words, in Sarah's case, maybe it turned out that it wasn't 5 touches for a sale, it was 7. And maybe instead of 10% of the people responding to her survey, it was only 5. And so then she's got to adjust her projections accordingly. And that's what's so great about including controllable actions in your goals, because those, you either hit them or you didn't, and you have more control because it's controllable. You actually can make sure you do it. Now, if you didn't take all the actions you said you would, that's another topic, and we are going to cover it in this workshop because it's really important. Okay, so now we've got goals and how to tweak them so that they are much more actionable than they otherwise would be. And now what comes next? Now comes the actual actions. Because goals are great, but consistent action is the only thing that gets our goals accomplished. So you already saw that some of the actions that Sarah and Homer came up with were listed down, but they weren't necessarily that specific. So, for example, Sarah said she was going to sell 200 units at $25 each by the end of her first fiscal year. And her 2 to 5 year goal was, I'm going to reach out to 3,700 people in the course of years 2 through 5 to sell an average of 279 kits per month, which should yield about 50,000 in net income by the end of my 3rd year. So, but how's she going to reach out? Now, in the marketing workshop, we already talked about some of the ideas that Sarah had come up with, and they were give out samples to friends along with a brochure or a card to share with their friends, and the card might have a discount coupon on it on the friend's first order with a 1-week expiration date. Or she might give out samples at a pet fair booth with a discount coupon on the first order with the expiration date of 1 day to try and make sure that people feel the urgency to do it. She could post on pet forums and help people there, or she could create a YouTube pet food cooking show. So those could all help for her first year goal. But what about the long-term goal to earn the 50,000 by fiscal year 3? So in this case, you want to think of something that might have a long tail that would need to get started now in year 1 so that Sarah can leverage it by the time she gets farther along when it's really going to benefit her. And a big one is going to be to start an email list, because Sarah can promote the email list when she's giving out samples and at the end of those YouTube videos if she decides to make them, or anywhere she goes. Homer, same thing. He's got his 1-year goal and his 2 to 5 year goal, and he came up with the ideas of branded brain games that people could play together and heartwarming stories on social media and a podcast called The Brainy Voices of Wisdom. And he could have his own company advertise on the podcast, so he could advertise his product, his service. And he also could go to libraries or senior centers and do live brain game demonstrations and have people play them live with him. So, and again, a few of those ideas could be used for both his short-term and his long-term goals, but some of them you can't do forever. So again, Homer wants to start an email list. You start it now when he's small, and he keeps building it, and it's going to serve him well as he goes along. Because even though there's lower open rates than there used to be, it's still one of the best forms of marketing because you own it, unlike social media that you don't own. So now it's time to evaluate all the options of things that he could do. And I'm going to use Homer as my example because more of you are in the professional and services business as opposed to selling an actual product. So this is called the Project Evaluator tool. And you will get a link to the template to create one of these for yourself if you want to use this tool. This is where you decide what you think is the best place to start. Because as I said earlier, it's executing on your ideas that are going to make you successful or not. And execution is 2 things. It's deciding what is the most important thing to do and how am I going to pull it off. So this is a way to help you decide what it is that you want to do. And in this case, what does Homer want to do? So you can see he has a bunch of ideas on the left-hand side. And then you can see there are columns where the impact is weighted. So you can, and so the idea here is that the lowest numbers are better. So if the impact is higher, it gets a lower score. If he has confidence that he can pull it off, he gives it a lower score. So the goal is to look to rate each one of these items, and then it's a spreadsheet. It automatically calculates the sum total on the right-hand side, and the one with the lowest score is generally the best. Now, you'll notice that it looks at all of these with equal weighting. So in other words, I want something that's going to provide me with the lowest risk to my business. So it's not going to cost me so much in time, in terms of money or time or reputation or some kind of risk that I perceive. Or if I got to spend a lot of money, if I have a lot of money, I don't care. But if I don't, I do care. Versus if it's going to spend me a lot of time. If I have money and no time, I'm going to look at that. So you're going to look at each one of these, and just because something is the lowest absolute number isn't necessarily the one you choose for these reasons. So if I have money and no time, I'm going to look more at one that's going to maybe be a higher cost, but doesn't cost me much in time. And if I have more time than money, I'm going to look at one that doesn't cost me as much, but that forces me to spend more time. But here, revenue and impact is more like social impact to my ultimate business, and revenue is like immediate revenue. And confidence is, do I think I can really pull this off? If I'm confident that I can pull it off, I'm giving it a 1, and if I'm not, I'm giving it a 5, and then it's anywhere in between. So this one, the 13, got the lowest score, which is go to libraries and senior centers or ethnic community centers or whatever they happen to be and do live brain game events. It's got the best score. So, but you can't do that until you create the games, which is number 1, the top one on the list. So even though it got the best score, I still really need to start with create brain games for people to play together. I don't necessarily have to create the sharing mechanism yet, but I got to start with the games. Once I have the games, now I could do either that one or the sharing them live. So now I have 2 choices. Now, so Homer's going to start by creating games, and then he says, I'm going to share them live, and I'm going to bring my card. Now, here's where I'll add something. You see this email one, free giveaway, blah, 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 blah. This has a 16, so it's not bad. The time it's going to take and the cost it's going to take are a little bit higher. However, we said earlier that that is something that he could be starting and then build on it over time. So in my mind, you kind of want 2 projects. You want the one you're really going to focus on hard, and then you have the one that's underneath, always in the background, that when you have time, you kind of work on it. So you would say to yourself, I'm Homer. I want to make sure I have the capacity to add people to an email list, even if I don't actually email them regularly, because I don't want to lose the contact I made with them. So that's going to be my underlying slow burn project, while my main project is create these games and start finding ways to share them. Because as soon as I have the capacity to collect emails, like a form on my website or something, a sign-up sheet somehow, even if it's in paper, I now can, when I go to the library or go to the senior center or wherever I go, I can get people to sign up for my email list because I paid attention to that. So that's kind of the thought process as to what you work on. Look at the choices. Don't just go with your gut. Analyze it. Figure out which one makes the most sense to be your primary focus. Have one that you're working on in the background when you have a couple minutes here or there, and keep chipping away at it. All right. So now that we've got the projects, now it's time for the tasks associated with those projects. So here is my second spreadsheet, which lists the fact that I'm going to do the games. And now I've listed all the tasks I have to do to create these games. Now you don't need to focus on them one at a time. It's really not that important. But what you do want to see is that there's 13 of them. Now, I sorted them in the order that I thought of them. It wasn't necessarily the order that they should be done. So I just gave them 1 through 13. You'll see over in the middle here, I have got a column called priority. And here's where I establish the priorities after the fact. And I also categorize them. Are they development related? Those got A. Are they marketing related? Those got B. Are they implementing it after I've done the marketing? Those get C. So I've got A, B, C, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, however many there are. And then I made start dates and all this complicated thing. So what I want to tell you is this. I do not recommend you do all this at one time for several reasons. One, the likelihood is whatever it is you choose to do is going to be more complicated than 13 steps. Two, it can start to feel overwhelming and almost demoralizing. And three, the likelihood is that things will happen that will adjust your timelines all the time. Now, I did this professionally and I still had to adjust timelines all the time. So for you to go through and set this and say, oh my gosh, this is going to end on the 26th. And so this one's going to start right after and it's going to be finished here and blah, 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 blah. And then when that one gets off, now I got to adjust all the dates and now I feel like I failed. Just don't even bother with that. Because the truth is, in most project management now, they don't even do it this way. They say, we can really only schedule about 2 weeks worth of work. And after that, it's just a guess. So what I would do is I would list the tasks I can think of, categorize them because that's helpful, say what they are because you need to know what they actually are, and then only schedule those that you believe you can accomplish in the first 2 weeks. And then say the rest will follow in some order. And you might put the order or you might not because you might change your mind. So this gives you the freedom to say, I'm going to be really strict about how I spend my time in the time that I kind of know I can manage because I already know my schedule. But out past 2 weeks, stuff can keep coming up. I might have meetings I didn't know about because I might have some opportunities I wasn't aware of and I want to take them. I want to take those opportunities and I cannot schedule this stuff like that. It's just putting me in too much of a box. So the most important thing is, again, what is the one thing to do first? And then estimate how long it's going to take. If you think the one thing's going to take you 2 weeks or more, just schedule the one thing. And that's it. That's all that's on your calendar other than doing the rest of the work. That's all that's on your calendar for project work, right? Because you're still maybe selling stuff and you're still doing marketing and you're still working, you're still taking care of your kids and all this stuff. So you want to schedule the one thing for the project that you selected and then say, what's next after that? And then next after that. Okay, so now that you've got them listed, now you want to actually schedule them in some way. Because there's a guy named James Clear who wrote a book called Atomic Habits, and he says, there's one common mistake we often make when it comes to setting goals. We set a deadline, but not a schedule. So it's all fine and good to have start date, end date. But what you want to do is consistently schedule the work throughout that time period. So, because the mark of a professional is to focus on the practice, not on the goal. So you want to put it on your calendar, your to-do list, your planner, your post-it notes. However you choose to schedule stuff is up to you. And you can always move it if you have to. If stuff comes up and you have no choice but to move it, if you put it on your Google Calendar, you just go whoop, whoop, move it. If it's on your planner, I would suggest you put it on post-it notes on your planner so you can just pick that up, peel it off the page you had it on, move it to another page, no problem, it's moved. But what you want to do is watch that you don't just keep moving stuff because you just didn't get around to it, because that's a signal of a deeper problem. And another thing you can do is block out time for specific types of work, like writing or editing or recipe testing or whatever it happens to be, because it's been found that our minds kind of get into a groove working a certain way. And so even if it's a different subject, like let's say you blocked it out for writing, you could do marketing writing, blog post writing. It kind of doesn't matter, but the mindset of writing is different from the mindset of editing, different from the mindset of recording a video or a podcast. And so once you get in that groove of doing the thing, you start picking up speed because your mind is now in that groove and it can work faster. And it's harder to shift gears. All right, so an example of what it might look like to schedule something on a weekly planner. And in this case, I used Sarah. Now, it's similar to a calendar, as you know, except a calendar would probably include the time of day, and this doesn't necessarily. Now, it's not enough to schedule it either. We actually have to do it, and you have to know you did it. So you want to track your success of doing the actions, not necessarily the success of the outcomes, but the success of keeping your commitment to yourself and your commitment to those that you wish to serve with your business. Because if you can tell yourself, boy, I did this, and this is one step closer to meeting my goal to serve however many dog owners or however many people who have parents or spouses who really need home care. And you can even turn it into a game. You can start a streak and you won't want to break it. It's the power of Wordle if you play Wordle. And if you, like I have an Amazon Kindle, and it will tell me how many days in a row that I've been reading on my Kindle. And it makes me not want to break the reading streak. I actually had 1,628 days in a row. And then I fell asleep one night before I could read and I blew it. So I was bummed. So lots of apps will give you a way to gamify what you're trying to do, so it will help you accomplish what you want. So if you have an app that helps you, all the better. And if not, make up a game for yourself. Because people will often tell you that it takes 21 days to build a habit, but it actually takes a lot longer than that. It's more likely 66 days to build a habit. So until you get into that habit of doing the things it will take to make your business go, you want to kind of gamify the process so that you're more likely to do it until it becomes rote. So once you set your goals, you're going to decide on which actions to take. You're going to schedule those actions, and then you're going to build the habit of doing the work like a professional. And until that habit is built, you're going to try and gamify it so you keep going and so you can compete with yourself. All right. So what if that's not working? There might be several reasons why what I just outlined is not happening. The first is you might tell yourself, this is too complicated. I can't do all this. It's just too complicated. So maybe it is too complicated for you, for whatever reason. So if it's just you and you're a startup, and especially if it's a side hustle while you're working full time, then keep this as simple as you can possibly make it. One, never schedule too far out. Two, you can just use Post-its and a calendar or a planner. Just find a way to decide what's number one, block out everything else, and only do number one on your list, and try to get it done by sticking it on your calendar, trying to break down whatever it is into small increments, like 10, 15 minutes. So if you got a couple spare minutes, I can just do this one thing and it's making me get number one closer. On the other hand, if you have funding or you've signed a lease or some other legal agreement that is now forcing you to try and make money faster, or you're trying to raise funding, now you have to be a lot more disciplined, and now the process is going to need to be a little more sophisticated to make sure you get it done. The second reason why it might not be working for you is that you might tell yourself, this has never worked before, why is it going to work now? Well, a lot of times the reason why these processes don't work is not because we don't know enough about what to do or how to do it. It's because of fear. Because it's fear of failure, it's fear of criticism, but even more, sometimes it's fear of success. Because now, if I succeed, now I have to repeat that. And I think, oh no, what if I'm a one-hit wonder? What if it's my first season in baseball and I had a 400 average and I can't repeat that, and next year it's only 200? So what I want to tell you is every single person, and especially every single entrepreneur, has this same fear. The difference is that they learn how to deal with the fear and live with it. No one overcomes the fear per se. We learn to live with it on next to us. And some people even lean into that fear and say, that shows me how much this matters. And so that's when the compelling goal will often drive us forward when nothing else will. And there's a book that is in your resources, so you don't have to write it down. It's called The Alter Ego Effect, written by Todd Herman, and he speaks to this. He has videos about it too, so you can check those out if you want to learn more. Now, you can start start really small and work your way up. You can start with the simplest actions and make it more complicated as you go, and make it more sophisticated as you go. Because any amount of organization is better than none. So anything you do to move yourself forward is going to help. So you want to set yourself up for success. Success builds on success. And the next thing is, you don't need to win. You don't even need to necessarily get an A in everything. All you need to do is cross the finish line. So if you're not the best at project management, you're not the best at organization, it doesn't matter. You can say, I can get a C in this and it's fine. And you want to choose what fits your own style, your own personality. Now, what if I say there's not enough time? And again, this may be true. If you are one of the people who is doing this part-time while you're doing something else that eats up a lot of your time, now is when you want to take those tasks, and maybe your task was this big, and you want to say, how can I turn it into the smallest possible piece that I can accomplish in 10 or 15 minutes? This feels ridiculous because it feels like, oh, now I've got 10 times more tasks than I would have had otherwise. But here's the thing, if you can actually get them done in the few minutes you've got, as opposed to the hour it's going to take for something bigger, you actually have a greater chance of getting it done. And you can now, again, you feel like you accomplished something, and success breeds success. And so when you have that hour, you can say, well, I can do 4 of those, instead of saying, oh, I have to wait until I have an hour. All right, now there's one more reason why you might not be getting things done. And that's because there is the 6 types of working genius This was invented by a group called the Table Group. 6 phases of work, starting from wonder, which is questioning things, and there was no one in that category because none of you said you were the philosopher, all the way to tenacity, which is people who are really good at pushing things across the finish line. It takes all 6 components of this work to do a project, all the way from W through T. But each one of us tends to have 2 out of the 6. So we have 2 geniuses, 2 that we're good at, but not especially good at, and 2 that frustrate us. So we might be okay at it, but we really hate doing it. So what I've done is I've broken things into this way. This wonder is asking the why. The what is invention and discernment, and the how is the 3 at the end. So if you're struggling with getting work done, there are 2 reasons that are under this umbrella that might be why it's not happening. Because if your genius is invention, you might keep spending time coming up with new ideas, new ideas, new ideas, new ideas, and getting bored after that. So if you're spending time in your working genius when the phase of the project is now after that, then you're never going to get it done. And also it's possible that you're avoiding doing what's in your working frustration because you really don't like doing it. So that's going to be an issue for every single one of us here, including myself. So what you want to do is find a way to compensate for this situation. 1, find people with different strengths than you, or find a way to get stuff done yourself. So those are the 2 choices. And you can give so 1, you may be able to find people where you can barter work, like somebody who's really good at management but not good at ideas, or somebody who's really good at ideas and you're not so good at ideas. Whatever it happens to be, maybe there's friends you have that you could say, oh, maybe you could help me with this and I'll help you with that. If you have to do the work yourself, now what you want to do is this. Give yourself permission to tell yourself you hate to do something, and reward yourself when you get it done. Also, choose a time of day when you're less likely to be tired to do the things that you really don't like, because if you're tired already and that makes you tired, then you're really not going to want to do it. And then again, turn it into a game and use your personality to figure out how to turn what would otherwise be a drag into something that's fun. Another thing that's really effective is scheduling virtual work sessions with other people who might be starting businesses just like yourself or doing things they don't like. And so now you're on a Zoom call together and no one's talking, but you're all focusing on doing the thing you don't like. And then after 50 minutes, you give yourselves a break and you all talk about it and commiserate on, oh my gosh, that was awful, but we all managed to get it done. So those are some suggestions I have for overcoming the real truth that there are going to be parts that you really don't like to do and aren't necessarily your strong suit. Okay, so that's the end of the teaching component, but I want to remind you that what's next is you're going to get an email with a link to the replay. You can study that and borrow the techniques that you like. You can follow up with the tools and the resources. You can practice what you've learned, and you can get a SCORE mentor if you don't have one already. And so with that, we will turn it over to Elle for the Q&A.
Great. Yeah, and remind everyone, if you have any questions, please add them into the Q&A box and we will answer them as they come in. Right now, Kathleen, we don't have any questions, but I did have one for you on your last segment because I thought that whole concept was really great, sort of understanding what type of working genius you are. And when your suggestions around, rallying with other business owners, how do people go about finding other like-minded sort of small business owners? How can they maybe make those connections?
Well, one good way is on LinkedIn. There are groups you can join on LinkedIn that could be helpful. Also just contacts that you already have. Um, you also can join business networking organizations, the Chamber of Commerce, and the meetings are fine, but almost look for opportunities to get to know people at some of those kinds of meetups to find like-minded people to then say to yourselves, boy, what if we did a Zoom or FaceTime or whatever session together? And again, it's not necessarily helping each other do work, or it might be, but in some cases it's just simply sitting there. I had an author friend who posted on her Facebook page and said to all her Facebook friends and just said, I'm trying to force myself to finish my book. I'm going to be writing for 3 hours on Saturday. If anybody wants to join me, DM me for the Zoom link. And there were about 8 of us there. And not all of us were writing. We were just doing whatever we felt was important for us to do for those 3 hours.
I like that commiserating together and just trying to get through it. So that accountability, I think, is helpful, right?
Very helpful.
Um, so there's another question from Alina, and she's asking, can you recommend any productivity tools or project management apps? Because there's so many out there. Any ones that you suggest as best?
Yes, I mean, it's going to be one you'll use. So if your calendar is your best tool, great. If you feel like you need something more comprehensive, Asana is pretty good, and there's a free version. Monday.com has a free version. Those are the two I'm most familiar with. There was another one that I used to use called Noseby, but I don't like it as much as Asana. I think Asana has more available tools in the free version than Noseby does. And you can also use note-taking apps if you want to, although they're not quite as good. But even like your Google Calendar has tasks now. So you could just use tasks in a calendar app if you like the super simple version.
Yeah, I've used both of those, and I like both of them. I also used Trello before. It's sort of like
Yes.
a board version, so very similar kind of, but I think all of those are easy to use. They're not overly cumbersome, right?
Right.
Great. And I think Felicia asked the same question, so I think that's perfect. And then she has a follow-up question. What if you have items which should be started in same or similar timeframes? How do you prioritize sort of same category and number, or what's your suggestion there?
Part of it's going to depend on whether you can do it yourself or whether you need someone else. So, and also if something else is dependent on it. So if I need, like, for example, in order for me to test recipes, if I'm Sarah, I need the ingredients. And I need to source those ingredients. So that's obviously, everything else is dependent on having that in place. So you want to think about, do I have dependencies? And if I don't, is one of them going to trigger a bunch of other things that could happen next? If not, then simply choose one of the two and start with it. I wouldn't try both at the same time.
All right, while we wait for any more questions, we do have a couple minutes left. I did want to launch a quick poll. If you are interested in getting a mentor with SCORE, you can answer the questions on this one, and I will reach out to you and let you know how to do that. Don't worry, you will not be bombarded by emails with me. It'll just be the only one that I send to you. But if you're interested in doing that, we can do that.
And I'm actually going to move because, believe it or not, this laptop is running out of battery. And so I'm going to go to where the battery is.
Good to see a good number of people are already working with a SCORE mentor, so
Yeah, that is good.
That's great.
Right. Any other questions from folks?
There's none in the queue at the moment, but if anyone has any, let us know.
Okay, Kathleen, I have to imagine that as you're thinking through different apps or different tools, there's probably somewhat of a trial and error aspect to this where you may find one that doesn't quite fit your work style or your personality and have to move on to the next one. Have
Mhm.
you had that in the past?
I have, and I'll just tell you for myself, I am a creative person, and sometimes I'm extremely well organized and ordered, and sometimes I completely rebel against any perceived constraints. And so what I find is that I have to vary how I do this depending on where I'm at the time. So in other words, I can only take extreme structure for so long before I can't stand it. And so I'll put stuff in a project management app and then I'll go, oh my gosh, I can't stand this. And then I'll switch and I'll stick post-it notes on my computer and then I'll schedule stuff on my calendar. So sometimes it just depends on kind of the ebb and flow of the rest of your life as to what's going to work for you. So don't feel like I have to find something and stick with it. I do not stick with it. I don't want to have nothing because nothing is a disaster, but I don't want to necessarily go, this is what I did, so now I'm doing it. It's know yourself. If you're anything like me, especially since I am an idea person and don't like the finishing details, I have to force myself to do the details at the end. I have to use a lot of vary the tools significantly to make myself do the details at the end. There's no doubt. That's why I teach this, because this is how I've had to learn about myself to figure out how to handle it for myself.
Yeah, and I know you've talked about this in the past too. It's like knowing where the headspace you are in certain times of the day. Like if you need to
Mm.
work on something creative for your marketing promotion and you're not a creative yet at 9 o'clock in the morning, then don't schedule it for the morning, right? Do it when you've had your afternoon coffee and you've got more energy around that, that headspace, right?
Yes, interestingly enough, also in your tools will be this book. I believe it's called When. We do our best creative work first thing in the morning. We do our best productive work first thing in the morning. So, because as the day has gone by a little bit, like shortly after lunch, our minds are a little more open. And so other ideas can come in.
Mhm.
And also, the more you keep your body moving, this isn't anywhere in the slides. The more you keep your body moving throughout the day, the more your creative mind will have ideas. And also, if you ask yourself the ideas before you go to bed, your mind, your subconscious mind will work on it in the night and you'll wake up in the morning and you'll probably have a solution. So let your mind do what it does best, which is kind of free form think occasionally and come back to stuff and come back to stuff and come back to stuff. Just don't procrastinate purely, but they call it productive procrastination, where you start working on something, you put it aside, you go for a walk, you come back, you go, oh my gosh, why didn't I think of that before? The big time happens. So,
I also find it's like helpful. I do a certain type of work at my desk and then other type of work in a different environment. Like I find that
mhm.
changing location and changing my, what's around me sometimes helps me and it becomes almost like a pattern. It's like, okay, I'm gonna do this work. I'm gonna go sit over here, by the window versus over at my desk. So that might be something that helps people sort of
Mm.
realize where they do their best work as along with the when they do it.
And for a specific type of thing,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I don't see any other questions. So I think we'll probably go ahead and wrap it up there. I want to thank everybody for joining us throughout these last couple weeks. I hope you got a lot out of our Startup School series. Again, if you are interested in revisiting anything, you can find all of our videos on our YouTube channel. Just search for Score Greater Hartford. If you subscribe to our channel, you'll be notified every time we put up a new webinar video. And also be sure to check out score.org if you're not already working with a mentor, and you can sign up for free mentoring services. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. I hope you all enjoyed it, and we will see you all soon. Take care.
Thanks so much, everyone. Good luck.